Okay, yeah, the HART Board of Directors. So if we could, well, let me welcome you. I now call to order this public hearing. I hereby open the public hearing this evening on the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget for Hillsborough Transit Authority. Anyone who may wish to speak this evening will need to sign up and identify themselves. On the back table of the room, we have made available to you documents summarizing the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget. These documents include the agenda for tonight's public hearing, which I will now outline. We will consider the adoption of the following resolutions. A resolution to adopt the levying of tentative ad valorem taxes in the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate. After hearing citizen comments, the board may make any changes it deems appropriate to the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate. A resolution adopting the tentative fiscal year 2018 annual budget. After hearing the citizen comments, the board may make any changes it deems appropriate to the tentative fiscal year 2018 annual budget. Each part of the hearing will be conducted as follows. HART Finance staff will read the titles of the resolutions on which specific action is needed. The board will then open the public hearing for citizen comments. In order to expedite hearing from everyone who wishes to speak, speaker comments are limited to 3 minutes. And then after citizen comments, the board will take action to move for approval of any changes and then move for approval of the required resolution adopting the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget. Prior to our discussion on the resolutions, staff will provide a brief presentation on the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget. And giving that presentation, we have Mr. Jeff Seward. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi. Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer of HART. Tonight is our discussion on the proposed tentative millage for FY 2018, as well as a proposed budget for 2018. I've had the opportunity to speak with many of you one-on-one on the work that the organization and the staff has completed on the tentative budget for next year. I will move through some discussion points that we have had the opportunity to talk about. We've talked about over the last couple of months. Some you will find within your packet and some you won't, just based on the fact that it's some backup that I have. So our proposed budget, our overview, as we've discussed, we have an 8.89% growth in ad valorem, which equates to $3.2 million. Now, I know this has changed over the last few months. We tentatively had wanted to lock that money into the bank for the next year. Through the different iterations of the budget development process, we had used some of that, we put some back, we used some of it. I can tell you that the budget that you are looking at tonight to tentatively propose has that amount of ad valorem dropping to the bank. There's just a small amount of money I'll talk about that's going into capital as required due to a match, but 98% of those funds are going to be dropped to the bank per the budget that's before you tonight. Our operating budget that's proposed, $70,567,388. That's a $2.1 million less than the FY17 adopted budget. But as I had the opportunity to speak with many of you, that's from budget to budget. So when we start talking about our mission max savings, it doesn't quite equate to what we've been saying. The reason it doesn't equate to what we've been saying is that we are building our budget on a cash flow basis. So knowing what we budgeted in the fiscal year 17 on what we were actually planning on spending by the end of this year is different. So when you take that into account, we're actually looking at $5.7 million lower than what we had anticipated in our revenues and our expenditures for FY17. Our starting point is really a $77 million target of reduction for this year and not what the FY17 budget has adopted. Our comprehensive operational analysis, the service changes that we're putting forth for FY 2018 equated to $6 million, and I'll talk about the breakdown of exactly where those savings have occurred. And our capital budget is $29,422,700, which is 0.3% lower than the FY17 amended budget. As we get to that, It is primarily made up of grant expenditures, and we have it broken out of exactly where those funds are going to be coming from in FY18. So Mission Max, the service changes that this board adopted. What are the savings and where did they come from during this budget development process? We ended up, the total savings was $6.9 million out of our operating budget for next year. The net savings is $6,036,874. And the reason it's netted, obviously, we'll have a reduction in fare revenue. And we're also anticipating a reduction in our 5307 formula grant funding. As part of that formula equation takes into account revenue miles, revenue hours. Both are going to be reduced in next year's service plan. So the resulting funds from that will also be decreased, and that's what we've anticipated. So a $6 million savings from the Mission Max for next year. Something that we have talked about extensively, not just in this budget development process, but in years past, is the need for this organization to build its fund balance and build its reserves. So when we have the opportunity to have access to federal funds that require a substantial local match, not only will we have that match available, but we will also be meeting the board's reserve requirement, which is 90 days of operating reserve set into the bank. That equates to about $17 million based on the $70 million budget that at some time during the year should be booked as far as our reserve is concerned. So what we want to do is, based on the starting in FY18 with the ability to take that additional ad valorem that we're receiving due to higher property valuations and putting that in the bank, is we want to work over the next 5 years at creating or recalibrating our fund balance. Now, what we want to be able to do is match that with the plans that we have established in the transit development plan, in which you will have for consideration at the September 25th board meeting. Within that plan, the 2% of the ad valorem increase has been set aside as a plan to add to service each year. Based on state projected values, the Department of Revenue for the state of Florida, that's the column of projected taxable value increase. That's what we use in the budgeting process to evaluate how much ad valorem we will have each year. Based on that and taking out that incremental impact or overage for the TDP, the drop to fund balance column is the plan to drop that amount of money into the bank over the next 5 years, totaling about $16.4 million. Now, that amount, coupled with the money that we have by year-end projection this year, at the end of 5 years, with this increase in potential property valuation, the increases in service per the TDP, and our current estimated ending point this year, we would end up with right around $27.5 million in the bank, which takes care of our 90-day reserve, it takes care of our federal formula, offset for cash flow, and it has a nice sum of money for any type of future federal program that we would be, one, able to achieve in that time period. Now, what this budget does not include, as far as revenues are concerned, is the Hillsborough County funding of the $2.3 million, which I understand was approved this week or last week. That is not included in this budget as potential revenue. What we would do is, once that plan is evaluated and crafted by our CEO, we'll be coming back to this board for a budget amendment to recognize those one-time, non-reoccurring expenses. So that is not included in this budget. What other revenues are not included in this budget? We were just notified on, right after the hurricane this week, that we received FDOT Section 5310 funding of just under $800,000. And we're going to use that for our paratransit system, for software development, for booking applications, It's going to modernize how we maintain the bookings on that side of the house. So that also is not included here and won't be. We'll come back for a budget amendment, most likely in the first quarter of the fiscal year, to amend the revenues to adequately reflect those dollars. So our proposed operating revenues, again, $70,567,000. The net of dropping the increase to fund balance. 52% of our budget is made up of revenues from our ad valorem. Passenger fares, which have shown and are reflecting 12%, almost a 13% reduction from prior year, FY17 for next year. FTA federal formula, pretty much static each year. We will start to see some of that decreasing over time, not in large chunks, but we want to start, again, moving some of that money away from our operating expenses back into capital investment, something that we have talked about over the last couple of years of having a desire to do. On the other revenue side, in one of the budget discussions that we had in June, we talked about available new revenues that we may have the opportunity to gain going into FY18. We're looking at some properties that we no longer require, have no plans for. We're looking at selling some of those properties. We're looking at potentially having an agreement with a cell tower carrier who will lease cell companies the leasing from the towers. That'll be small revenue at first, but we're looking at ramping that up over the next year or so. Hopefully, we'll have something coming to the board within the next quarter to talk a little bit more about that as well. Now, on the expense side, again, we were starting with the idea that, if you recall, when we started talking about the zero-based budgeting process, we were looking at almost a $13 million deficit of where we needed to be based on potential revenues and where we typically would spend or have spent, irrespective of the decrease due to Mission Max. What we were able to do is, again, almost drop $11 million of expense out of this year's or out of next year's proposed budget, including Mission Max. We were able to do that through a variety of means, some tangible, some non-tangible. The non-tangibles are discretionary accounting bookings, where we would actually book the liability expense for something that's booked elsewhere as a liability. There's no reason to do that. It's kind of an artificial drawdown of the budget, but it still brings that number down. We had some financing payments for information technology that were due next year. We went ahead and paid those out of this year's budget. So those were deferred. We paid off the City of Tampa TIF. That's a $600,000 payment that no longer exists. We dropped $215,000 of contingency that we typically have for a rainy day. We shelved that. We went through, eliminated vacancies, FTE vacancies of positions. Talk a little bit more about the positions as we get into that component of the expense side of the house. But at the same time, we reduced $11 million of savings. We also increased in several areas. A couple of those areas include our marketing contract, which you approved this year, planning consultant fees, external auditing fees, $100,000 environmental remediation. We're going to implement ADP. We talked about moving a lot of our, not a lot, but some of our core internal support functions to outside vendors. ADP is one of the first moves to that, and that will be coming to the board on September 25th for consideration as well. And it's just not the payroll function that we're looking at, but we're looking at the whole breadth of how we manage our employees from the time that they get recruited, hired, maintained as a valued employee in our organization to the time that they retire or they leave the organization. A seamless process that we can now start moving some of that functionality outside of our organization. And again, on the 25th, we'll have a more robust conversation of exactly what that looks like over the next 5 years. Our cash counting function is officially been turned over to an outside vendor will be on October the 1st. We are one of very few transit agencies across the country that still use internal staff to do that work, and we're moving it out. The board approved the contract or will approve the contract, hopefully, on September 25th, but we are moving that function outside as well. On our legal services, we increased for a labor attorney, a new contract for general liability TPA, and then our new CAO has come in and a very robust look at our risk and our liability needs for this organization. We are finding in many areas we have been underinsured in several areas, and we're working to build that up and make that more robust, particularly in light of what has occurred over the last couple of weeks. We pretty much came out of this unscathed as an organization, but that always won't be the case. And being self-insured, we have to ensure that we have that foundational element of liability in place. Insurance costs, I mentioned that before, streetcar advertising, ridership development, increase in bus parts for our CNG fleet, all expenses that netted that overall savings of $11 million. But we were looking at a budget of a need of almost $80 million, and we were able, one, through the reduction of service, through the mission max for next year, as well as the zero-based budgeting approach, and really cleaning up this budget to something that we feel very strongly that really represents what we do as an organization. Our position breakdown. Now, as far as our expenditures are concerned, you'll see that there's a difference between FY17 budgeted and where we propose for next year, a difference of 66.81 FTEs. So there are 66 paid FTEs that are no longer in our budget for FY18. And the breakdown, 31 of those are direct result of our mission max. The others include the count room, and the remainder include vacancies that we're just simply not going to fill for next year. Now, of that total of 774, there are still positions in there that are not full, that are not filled, and they may remain empty throughout the year, but we do have that cushion. But we reduced 66 FTEs. Now, what's important to remember as we discuss this, that isn't 66 people out the door. There's a 66 vacancies that were in place in FY17 that will no longer be in place in 18. Mission Max did result in 31 filled positions being vacated. The remainder of those positions include the count room, as well as other vacant positions, non-bargaining and bargaining throughout the organization. Our proposed capital budget. I had spoken to some of you about the fact that we weren't going to have any local dollars or ad valorem going into the capital budget for this year. By law, we have to have some local match as far as our federal grants are concerned. So we have $254,000 of that ad valorem that will go into the capital program if it is needed through the year. The remainder, as you can see by the breakout on the chart before you, federal and state. FTA discretionary, FTA Florida Highway, or Federal Highway, FDOT, and the FTA formula make up the majority of our capital program for next year. Now, as you see, the biggest capital investment that we have, and typically it's the same every year, is our continued revitalization of our diesel fleet to CNG. We're anticipating 22 new CNG buses for next year. Our HM building renovation. This has been on the capital budget for the last 2 years. And we have made a commitment based on having someone come in, an outside consultant, talk to us about the opportunities for the renovation of that building. Now, it's already approaching its end of its useful life. For every dollar of federal money that we put into that building, we extend the useful life of that building exponentially. Almost another 20 years if we invested the whole $5 million. So coming before you in the next month will be a discussion on why the organization and senior leadership has decided to move forward with the construction of a new facility on our site at 21st instead of the revitalization of our current facility. A couple of key points on our current facility and why we're making that decision. This was pre-code, hurricane code, ADA code, typical modern building codes when that building was first developed. We're looking at over $7.5 million just to ensure code compliance. That's not doing any real renovations for the productivity or efficiencies of that organization. It's simply just to bring it up to code. We're looking now at spending anywhere on top of the $5 million, anywhere between $9 and $12 million more for a new facility based on the decision on what we are looking at as far as square footage is concerned. So again, over the next month, we'll be coming back to you with a much more detailed description of why we're choosing to move down that path. 2 weeks ago, we formally applied for a federal facilities grant, specifically for this building. We're looking at asking for between $18 and $20 million for that facility. And as that progresses through the evaluation process, we'll report back to you on what the funding that's going to be required for that. I will say that of all the grants that we put forward for federal discretionary, this is the grant that has the most congressional support and senatorial support of any that we've submitted. It was fantastic to see all of the support that we received from our delegation specifically for this facility grant. Other proposed capital projects, Flamingo with a regional fair collection. You'll be receiving a very detailed update on where we are with that program in the coming week in the CEO Weekly. And we are also going to put it as a normal weekly update to you so you know where we are. The region is moving forward. This weekend, we had staff in Hernando County helping them with their installation. So we are still leading the effort. We're still paying for the effort, and we are moving forward with it. Streetcar capital maintenance. As you may recall, the streetcar budget does get adopted by THS, and the operational budget is embedded within the current HART budget. The THS budget does not contain any capital investment. Capital investment for the streetcar comes from this board and is included in our capital project funding. IT hardware and software upgrades. We continue to modernize our IT infrastructure. Something that we learned definitely over the last week or so is the importance of redundancy and the ability to maintain our systems, not just for our employees, but for our patrons as well. We have a premium transit commuter study being funded by FDOT as part of next year's capital budget, as well as the autonomous vehicle pilot. Security surveillance system. We're looking at a robust infrastructure change and project to bring, one, a modernization of our current surveillance of our facilities up to speed, and second, an expansion of that system. Our bus stops and shelters. This does not include our Mission Max expenditures that we're using to relocate and shut down bus stops and build new ones. We're actually leveraging the money that we receive from impact fees to be able to help with the Mission Max component. This is our typical upgrade for ADA compliance of our existing stops for next year. Engine and transmission replacements. A lot of these capital projects, such as engine and transmission replacements, was actually reduced based on the fact that our fleet has decreased due to Mission Max as well. And then the smaller things, if I can provide more detail on what these projects actually are, and more detail if you would like under separate cover. So that concludes the staff presentation. Again, this year we're bringing a budget that represents what we have truly spent over the last couple of years and getting that under control and in line, specifically in those large expenditures that we've seen in the past, including healthcare, reoccurring liability costs. We are very comfortable as a senior staff and an organization that we can spend within the limits of this budget, provide the service that this board has adopted, and still save for the future. It's something that the three haven't necessarily aligned themselves with well over the last few years, but we are very confident that we have a budget right now that's before you tonight for consideration that will do just that.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. This is or as required by state statutes, we will now discuss the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget. Director McLean, did you have some comments or questions?
Just first off, Jeff, good briefing, thank you, and I'm pleased with the direction we're taking. The only thing that caught me a little off guard was the streetcar and the funding for the streetcar. I didn't realize we funded streetcar. I thought we operated it, but not necessarily funded it.
We don't fund the operating side.
Okay.
We fund the capital side. Okay. And I can give you a much more detailed breakdown of exactly where that funding comes from. Some of it does come from our federal formula funding. Some of it comes from federal grants. There is no ad valorem that's used. There are no local dollars. It is grant funding. But I can provide a detail of exactly where that comes from and what it's used for if you would like.
And Director Jacob?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I think is important to note too is that we've been investing heavily on upgrading a lot of the streetcar. With some of the things, as you all know, that's a unique system in of itself and provides some challenges in terms of some of the maintenance that's necessary for it. We've also improved the air conditioning of it, which the patrons have certainly let us know has been a very important addition to it, and we're continuing to add that in. But yeah, we're diligently making sure that the streetcar can operate and investing appropriately in that to continue to hopefully increase its awareness as a transit option in the community.
Any other comments or questions of, yes, Commissioner Merman?
Thank you. The streetcar, they're still doing that master plan, right? Mm-hmm. The big study. Right. And we really don't know what's going to come out of that. It probably will be an application for an FTA grant, I would imagine, to modernize it and take it to the next level. Is that kind of what you're anticipating? Yes. So I guess I just, you know, in the big picture of things, for us to invest a lot of money in the streetcar right now till we see that plan, may not be, it would be a lower priority for me, but I understand we have to keep it running and keep it going because I know it's heavily used, especially on events, but it is in dire need of modernization, and we have no idea what's going to be recommended, I think, at this point. Do you? You're the representative on that board.
I feel like the recommendation will be somewhat robust in terms of looking at ways to extend the routes in order to make it work as a transit system within the area it's servicing, and hopefully, you know, we can do that. I think your assessment of getting FTA grants is exactly right where we're looking at it too. I think there's other options that we're looking at right now in lieu of the things that are going on in the Channel District with our development projects there. There's opportunities for new revenue sources to extend the hours of the streetcar to service the need of trying to get the amount of workers that are going to be necessary in the district as it goes forward, and parking constraints that they will have, in addition working with the arena to better support the events there, because they will have parking constraints with the development areas that they have. They're losing so much of their ground parking at this point in time. So we're looking at those options as well as working that out, because that can be additional, very, very substantial amounts of revenue that we can generate with that to help supplement some of the things we're investing in right now. So I'm pretty excited about at least the possibilities in the short term.
Good. I have a second point.
Oh, we'll continue then. You had the floor.
It doesn't matter. I can
Oh,
pick her up.
well, let's go with
It
her
might
and
be
we'll
on
come
the
back to you. Commissioner Kemp?
I just wanted to make sure for clarification purposes with the public watching that this is, in terms of what we're talking about tonight, is not on the table or anything like that, and that basically the $2 million that you're talking about more or less are kind of federal state grants for, and these are kind of almost like we're the pass-through for those capital. So I don't want people to misunderstand and think that we're taking money from our HART budget or that we're planning any. That's all. I just want to clarify because I think it could get confusing.
Okay, Commissioner Merman, did you want to?
One other point I'd like to make, and I think I say this is like my annual recital about trying to raise more money for HART. But I have been talking to congressional staff and lobbyists, and there is a lot of money in the FTA right now that is just sitting there waiting to be given away to districts for transportation projects. I've heard it from many, many, many people. And I guess what I'd like to see is something out, drawing a project out of this premium transit study and not waiting. If we know there's going to be a project in there, a BRT project in there, in the premium transit study coming out, because we already know, we've seen the routes and, the configuration, let's go for it and not wait to the very last minute to apply for these grants, because it just takes so much time. And the fact that, the president is starting to fast track projects, I mean, things are moving in infrastructure. And I feel like we cannot afford to wait another day to get money in here from these FTA grants. You have plenty of people that can lobby, the elected officials on this board that can really use our influence. With Vern Buchanan, his staff has asked me many times. He covers South County. I think let's get to it. Get done.
Commissioner White.
Thank you. And I'm not trying to pick a fight with Commissioner Kemp, but I mean that $2+ million for the streetcar maintenance, I mean, that's not truly a pass-through in the true sense of the term. I mean, this board has the ability and authority to decide whether or not we're going to appropriate those funds towards this project, correct? Correct. Okay. And so I echo Director McLean's concerns. I mean, I really do. I mean, I know we're taking a long, hard look at the streetcar, but I really do think the time has come to be intellectually honest about that project and, really put it under the microscope at this point. Can we go to the very last slide? I just want to make sure I understand something correctly. So we have these local dollars, 350.15. That's those impact fee dollars, right? Yes. Okay, and then we have the ad valorem, a little over $250,000. They add up to about 2% of the capital budget. The other 98%, I see the sources on the pie chart. Are all of those dollars considered grant dollars in the true sense of the term? So our capital budget's 98% grant funding. Dollars.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's important to note as well. I guess that's really it at this point. I just wanted to share the concerns, about the streetcar.
Okay, any other comments, Director McLean?
Just to be clear, though, I am a fan of the streetcar. I just want to know where the funding was coming from and if that was coming directly out of our dollars or grant dollars, and I think I understand that a lot better now. So.
Okay, very good. And I don't know if I skipped your next part. Yes, Commissioner Merman.
The bus stops and shelters. Okay. I have been driving around looking at bus stops and shelters, and they are in dire need of assessment first and improvement second. I am telling you, and with this storm, I'm sure they had to have taken a beating. Does anybody have any information they could give us on this, the bus shelters, the bus stops? Were they okay? Because 500,000 is not going to go very far.
And I welcome Ruthie coming up, but I also just want to point out that we are having a regular board meeting after the fact, that this is the public hearing on the budget, but it is relating to the budget.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm thinking if we're prioritizing dollars.
Yes, absolutely.
I've been asked by many people to get covered bus shelters at these bus stops in areas where we don't have them.
Ms. Reyes?
Thank you. Good evening. Ruthie Reyes-Burkhardt, Chief Operating Officer for HART, and thank you for that question. One of the things that we know from Irma is that we were very much spared from the sense of damages to any of our shelters. We only saw, I think, one or two where a panel or something was blown out or damaged, and in that respect, we're super fortunate. Separately, though, as part of Mission Max, there is approximately 800 a delta of about 800 bus stops, some of which are sheltered, and we're going to use the shelter relocation program while we're eliminating some stops, removing those good shelters and moving them into areas that had poor or inadequate, or what we call Key West older style shelters, so they'll have better coverage. So we're going to recycle, if you will, the better version of the shelters that were going to be eliminated from stops that were removed as part of this COA or Mission Max, and move them into areas that needed shelters or replaced shelters.
Thank you, Ruthie. That's really good information. And I would like to see us kind of move into a much more comprehensive assessment of our shelters and have you come back and report, but we'll bring it up at the board meeting next week.
Very good. Okay, and Jeff, sorry, Commissioner White, we have another comment.
I did forget a question. What's the timeline on the heavy maintenance building renovation?
One, we're waiting for the funding side of the house to see exactly what, if we're going to have to pursue financing, or we'll be able to get the grant. We're in the design phase right now. And over the next, we'll come back and present an entire plan to the board. We're looking at over the next year for design, trying to look at the exact location for the facility. We don't want to most likely not build it on the same exact location or the footprint. So again, we're in the design phase right now.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Okay. I think you're on next with.
Okay. This is the first required public hearing on the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget as indicated by the trim notices previously mailed to all taxpayers, and our notice in the newspaper that we canceled due to the hurricane, which is not part of the script. The tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate of 0.5 mils is the same as the adopted fiscal year 2017 millage rate of 0.5 mils. The tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate is 6.43% more than the rollback rate of 0.4698 mils. The tentative fiscal year 2018 annual budget is $99,990,088, which represents a decrease of 2.2% from the amended fiscal year 2017 annual budget. The tentative fiscal year 2018 annual budget consists of the following components. Total tentative operating budget, $70,567,388. Total tentative capital budget, $29,422,700. Total tentative annual budget, $99,990,088. The tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget were subjects of board and committee meetings conducted April through August 2017. The tentative fiscal year 2018 not to exceed millage rate was provided to the property appraiser on July 17, 2017 in conformance with state law and set at the July 17, 2017 board meeting.
Okay, and at this point, I wanted to read into the record that Commissioner Miller had a death in a family, so he was not able to attend today. So I want to make sure that we get that in the record. So now at this point, are there any other questions of staff before we proceed? I think we've already done that step. So if not, we'll now take public comment regarding the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and budget. For those who wish to speak, I ask that you please limit your conversation to 3 minutes. And I have the list of signups. We're going to start with Mr. Gary Cloyd. Welcome.
Good evening, board members. Gary Cloyd, Transportation Advocate. As this relates to the capital improvement program of the budget, I wanted to make everybody aware that on Wednesday, the county commissioners will be bringing up some dialogue related to this, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cloyd. And the other sign up that I have is Karen Michalski. Welcome. And hopefully I didn't butcher your name too bad.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'll start attending more. I wasn't aware of these meetings. I urge you to increase the budget. I realize that this has always been the status quo, and many of you aren't familiar with the bus system and the people that it serves. Going to the Mission Max, you have completely eliminated Temple Terrace. On Temple Terrace, you have the largest Muslim church there, or mosque. You have Tampa Bay Tech, who no longer are going to be able to use the bus system. You have a community health center on Sly Avenue that will no longer be served by the 41. The 41 and the 57 are completely now lost in the Temple Terrace area, as well as there are many low-income apartment communities that will no longer be served. Now, you might think, oh, this isn't many people, but these are the people who need it desperately. They have no choice. How are they going to get to that health center? How are they going to get to that parks on Sly Avenue as well? How are they going to get to grocery stores? Right there, the 41 and the 57 take you to Publix and to Winn-Dixie. How are they going to do that? There's not going to be that opportunity. And I would think that we could go to a point, right now it's 0.5, doubling our millage rate. Now this might seem like a lot and like, oh my gosh, what would we do this money? But you need to extend the bus systems so that we can have better service for the whole entire community, as well as you can start offering services to and from USF and easily to the airport. I mean, I know there's some new routes, but we need more routes. You can be having events of Temple Terrace is struggling. You could then be offering community events of coming to Temple Terrace from Ybor. You could be having Temple Terrace could be having communities for USF, so students could be living there, because right now you only have that USF shuttle. I mean, you really could be helping the community. As you might well know, I'm near Temple Terrace. So I thank you for this, and I desperately urge you to try to look at the fuller community and not just specific ones, and the communities that ultimately need it. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Ms. Commissioner Donahue?
I don't believe you gave us your address.
Your name and your address, please.
Oh, we didn't have to give our address at the BOCC.
Oh. Okay.
So that's why. 7903 West Whitewater Court.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone in the audience who would wish to comment? Seeing none, I will close this portion of the public hearing and open the board to further board discussion.
Chair,
yes, sir.
I'd like to elaborate briefly on a point that was made by Jeff. As you know, the notice is supposed to go by trim notice for this first hearing. It's an obligation of statute. Due to the circumstances of Irma, the governor promulgated Executive Order 17-235. It authorized the Department of Revenue to promulgate additional notice provisions, so we did not have to send a new trim notice in order to properly notify this hearing. All of those notice provisions were complied with, and this is a properly noticed hearing. I just think the record should reflect that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And our second hearing will be next week, and that was properly noticed as before. Okay, thank you so much. So are there any board members? I see Mr. Seward has approached the podium. Any more discussion on our budget? Yes, Commissioner Merman.
Thank you. I just have one more question because it's going to probably depend on how I vote. Is the final dissolution or resolution of those items that were brought up at a previous meeting about the military routes and all that through Mission Max? And I just want to make sure, are we going to get a report back on, are they going to be incorporated into the budget? Are we bringing those routes back, or? I'm not sure. I know where we ended up on the TDP, but what's going to happen?
Well, with regard to the routes to MacDill, we did go out to MacDill to meet with some of the constituents out there, inclusive of this past Friday. HART marketing and community relations staff went out to further explain some of the route information and provide them with the specific schedules, inclusive of the fact the new route 360 and 60 that serve in that area, and with the 1 hour frequency. So we did also provide that we would have additional buses available if the number of buses were too crowded to serve the amount of constituents that were riding based on the changes that were provided through Mission Max. Separately, the one thing that has been added back in South County, a South County shopper, which in essence replaces the Route 53 LX. An arrangement was made to have a 2-day shopper, which was what was discussed with the community. On Tuesdays and Thursdays will be launched to serve that community, running from the Kings Point City Center to touch on St. Joseph's Hospital and up to Brandon Mall, and it will have the frequencies from 8 a.m. to, I believe, 6 p.m. 2 days a week. And that's going to be called the Route 75 LX. So that is being implemented as a result of the past community meeting.
Okay, so just to summarize, you still are moving ahead with the, you reduced by, I think, 1 bus or 2 buses on the Fishhawk to McDill.
Yes, ma'am. But they did add in the 360, which gets the folks all-day hourly frequency to from Brandon Mall or Brandon area to the base as well, which does now incorporate a higher level of the community having access to the base.
Still doesn't help service people. There's 50, I think I just saw the latest count, it's 5,400 that live in South County that need transportation, low-cost transportation to get to work. So I guess I'll wait and hear more next week when we discuss it further.
Commissioner White, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to echo Commissioner Merman's sentiments, and we've been working on that on the Board of County Commissioners side a little bit as well. I mean, I'd like to see, you know, some of that $2 million go towards service from McDill to Fishhawk. I mean, I don't know what the budget for that looks like, but, you know, I certainly think we can be creative, and the same holds true for Sun City Center. I know we've talked about smaller vehicle options for mass transit, you know, something in the cargo van sized arena or a smaller bus, something like that. So I think we have to be outside of the box and be creative. I'm going to go ahead and support the overall budget today, but I'm definitely going to be very mindful of this as we look at how to divvy up that $2+ million that we're going to grant to this board. You know, it appears that it's going to pass at the county commission level, and at that point, I know the county's folks will work with you guys on an interlocal agreement to decide how that $2 million is going to be spent. So, but ditto to what Commissioner Merman had to say.
Well, I would just like to comment, since this is going to be considered a grant by the county, I would think that the county might be able to specify how they would like that money to be spent. You know, I haven't been to your meetings and haven't been on the discussion, but perhaps that's an opportunity.
Yes, it appears that there will be an interlocal agreement.
Yeah, they're supposed to bring a plan back. I thought it would be Wednesday, but I think because of Irma, things have gotten delayed a little bit, so it'll probably be our first meeting in October.
Right, and then I think we'll do a budget resolution on that, so it really doesn't impact the current budget, but we'll do a budget amendment, and certainly that will be part of the discussion when we do the amendment. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think what the speaker may have referred to with respect to this Wednesday is the Board of County Commissioners allocating some impact fee dollars to HART, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I've probably been around government a little too long at this point, but it's the relatively small amount, $350,000. So, but yeah, the big conversation is forthcoming for sure. So,
didn't we finally approve all that? I mean, that was a final vote.
No.
This is
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Kemp.
This is impact fees
Oh,
that
the
have,
impact fees.
so it
Oh,
has to
okay.
be set aside, it
Yeah.
has to be a capital expenditure and whatever.
I got
Yeah.
you. Okay. I thought it was
Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments from board members? We will now take a vote on the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate and annual budget. Seeing as though the public comment has been heard or not or not comments were made, the resolution will now be read.
The resolutions read as follows. Resolution number R 2017-09-34, a resolution of the Hillsborough Transit Authority of Hillsborough County, Florida, adopting the levying of tentative ad valorem taxes, adopting the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate of 0.5, and providing for effective date. Resolution number R 2017-09-35, a resolution of the Hillsborough Transit Authority of Hillsborough County, Florida, adopting the tentative fiscal year 2018 annual budget and providing for an effective date.
Okay, do I have I have a motion to approve the resolution in a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None.
You are in fact approving the millage first as required by statute, and then you'll approve the budget second. So the first motion was the motion to approve the millage?
Okay.
Just want to make sure that the record reflects that.
Okay, so that was the resolution to adopt the millage rate, and state statutes require that we approve the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate before we approve the tentative fiscal year annual budget. Accordingly, we will vote on the tentative fiscal year millage rate resolution first, and that's what we just did. So now do I have anyone would like to move to adopt the tentative fiscal year annual budget?
Motion to move.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner McLean, seconded by Commissioner Kemp. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion adopted. In compliance with Florida statutes, a public hearing has been held on September 18th, 2017 for the purpose of considering the tentative fiscal year 2018 millage rate necessary to fund the tentative fiscal year 2018 annual budget. This concludes the budget public hearing component of tonight's meeting. The final public hearing is scheduled for Monday, September 25th, 2017 at 5:30 here at the HART Administrative Office in Ybor City. Okay, thank you. And for that, we'll go on to our regular agenda. And I would like to call the meeting to order. We missed this part. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. And do we have close public hearing, board action? Okay, approval of the minutes. Get a motion in a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Public input on the agenda items for the board meeting. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak?
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I don't believe we noticed the regular meeting for tonight.
Oh.
This is just a board meeting for the first adoption of the budget?
Right.
Okay, so we're done.
Yes.
Hey,
Got some
I would
good
like
news,
to put
you're
into
done.
the record that I was just notified I was going to be chair today. Thank you all for your understanding.
You would actually need to cross out and